Welcome, everyone. My name is Rabiah Alicia Burks, and I'm the Vice President of Communications for FAMM Foundation. We decided that today would be a great day to catch everybody up on what's happening with the home confinement issue and to bring together advocates and people who are directly impacted by the issue to give a primer and a briefing and an update on what's happening. So we're going to start the way the program is going to flow. There are going to be 4 panels total. Each will be 15 minutes. They're going to be short, quick bites. And at the end, we'll take questions from the audience and from whoever is watching. So you can, of course, pop your questions in the chat, pop your questions in the Q&A, and we will definitely get to them, but they will be asked at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kevin Ring, who's going to be the moderator of our first panel.
All right. I'm going to be joined by Udi and Dawn. Excellent. Thanks, Rabiah. Thanks for everyone who's joining us. I'm going to start with a quick overview. I'm going to speak quickly because a lot has happened and I want to catch everybody up, especially those who haven't been paying attention. So thanks for joining us. Again, my name is Kevin Ring. I'm the president of FAMM. In March 2020, as the spread of COVID-19 accelerated around the country, Congress passed the CARES Act to provide economic assistance to businesses and individuals. Included in the law was provision authorizing the Justice Department to transfer people in federal prison to home confinement sooner than they normally would be able to in order to mitigate the spread of COVID in federal prisons. By law, people in federal prison usually only get 6 months or 10%, whichever is less at the end of their sentence, to serve on home confinement. But the CARES Act gave the Attorney General the authority to give people more time. And this was a life-saving move, and it was a smart bipartisan effort by Congress. Soon after the law passed, Attorney General Barr established criteria for who would be eligible for this expanded home confinement. Out of concern for public safety, he limited eligibility to those who had served at least 50% of their sentence, had no violence in their record, had no disciplinary infractions in the last 12 months of their prison term, and who scored at the minimum risk level on DOJ's pattern risk assessment tool. In other words, even though risk is impossible to gauge with certainty, the Attorney General sought to release those who were the lowest of low risk. And a year and a half later, we can say that they succeeded. During that past 18 months, approximately 7,500 people have been sent to home confinement under the CARES Act for these extended home confinement terms. The latest numbers we have show that just 223 have violated the terms of their supervision, which you will hear shortly is very strict. That's fewer than 3%. And just a few people total have committed new crimes, none of which would be considered major. So it's been an incredible success. Now, many of these people have been home for over a year now, and they're fully reintegrated into their families and their communities. They've done everything right. They're working and they're paying taxes, which you will also hear about shortly. And so everything has been a success. But what's the problem? Well, on January 15th, in the final days of the Trump administration, the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel issued an opinion that said essentially, the Attorney General's authority to give people extended home confinement expires when the pandemic ends. And that includes those people he already sent home. So they need to return to prison when the emergency period ends. And as of right now, that emergency period we think is going to end at the end of January. Now, Dawn Burks, who you will hear from shortly, first notified us about this situation in January. She and others who had been released to home confinement were terrified about the prospect of having to go back, especially since the Bureau of Prisons never suggested to them that they would have to return. Since then, FAMM and other organizations have been pushing the Biden administration to take action to keep these people home. 9 months later, we're still at it. We think we've made some progress, as Udi will share in just a moment, but we are far from satisfied that the situation will be fixed. To be clear, we believe it would be absolutely wrong and immoral to make these people return to prison, to re-separate hundreds, if not thousands of families for no public safety benefit. Moreover, we are frustrated that the administration has not made clear to all of these people by now that so long as they follow the rules, they will not be sent back. Months of silence and inaction has caused extreme and unnecessary anxiety for these families. They wake up every day not knowing if their loved one is going to be with them in a few months or have to be going back to prison. And the people on home confinement are caught in this horrible limbo. Can they start a relationship or family? Can they take out a mortgage or a loan? What should they say when they're interviewing for a job? Many haven't even told their kids that there's a chance of them going back because it's too painful. So our message is clear to President Biden. You should fix this now. This is not political. This is not a right-left issue. It's a right and wrong issue. That's why groups from across the ideological spectrum and law enforcement have joined this campaign to keep them home. And so I'm very excited with the speakers we have today. We're going to be happy to answer your questions at the end. And my first task and honor is to introduce somebody who I've gotten to know close over the last several months, and that's Dawn Burks. Dawn?
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And thank you very much, Kevin. You and FAMM have been excellent working team. And I thank you for having me on. Certainly we are here because when this pandemic started, BOP was not prepared for what would happen for those of us that were incarcerated. And even though BAR tried to implement a policy that would help us by telling them to let people go, it still has been a difficult road, as you will hear more about later, as some of the panelists go into detail about their experiences on home confinement. Many don't understand that this is not a picnic walk. Yes, we are all grateful to be released. Certainly the conditions in prison are far worse than the conditions at home. However, being on an ankle monitor and having to report everything that you do is not an easy road to walk. And so the restrictions themselves sometimes become prohibitive from helping folks get on their feet to be productive citizens as we would want them to be. And also getting the public to understand that we are low risk. We're not talking about violent criminals. We're talking about people who probably should have never been in prisons to start with. The fact that the United States over incarcerates people, we have these mandatory sentence minimums and all of these things that add to incarceration versus looking at alternatives. It would seem to me that this has been the perfect pilot program to show that there are alternatives and things we can do that work. So instead of it being a hindrance and us looking at how we send people back, let's look at how we take this pilot and grow it so that many more people could be released. Why do we need a pandemic to realize that we don't need to incarcerate people at the levels that we do in the United States? So I would just hope that as Biden looks at these policies and practices, we have to catch up. We're far behind in looking at legislation and laws and policies and even the just general process of how we look at incarceration in the United States. We don't need to have people, you lock people up and throw away the key. Why? The whole point is supposed to be to rehabilitate them, to allow them to go back out and succeed. Well, this is a population that's proving that we are doing that. We are already working. We are already home with families. Many of us are rebuilding our lives. And the idea that all of that could be lost in a moment because there was nothing put in place to allow BOP to give authorization for us to stay out beyond the CARES Act is incredibly sad. Not only is it, I feel like it's double jeopardy. We left our families once to go be incarcerated. We had to say goodbye. We came home through no fault of our own, but because of a pandemic. And now what do you tell, for me, your grandchildren about why you have to go back? It just doesn't make sense. And so I hope that all of the work that we are doing will be heard and that people will realize that we can change the justice system as a whole. We can look at a restorative justice system. We can look at how we take this program and start re-evaluating how long people are in jail and just what all of it means long term for our justice system. This could be the beginning of all of the things we've been dreaming about in terms of how you change this vicious cycle. So I would like to hope that President Biden, I hope you hear us today. For those that will be speaking after me, that will get to share their personal experiences about what it's meant to be home, about the restrictions of home confinement, and even law enforcement who are speaking out to say, we don't need them to come back. Businesses who are saying, some of us have worked jobs that otherwise might have gone unfilled. As the pandemic happened, you had people who have come home, they are nurses' aides and home health aides and warehouse workers and all of the things that have been needed in this pandemic as the workforce has shrunk. So for all of the positive things that are being done, I would hope that he would take that positive step by signing clemency for all of us. And the reason why we ask for clemency is just because of the restrictions of home confinement. We understand that we committed a crime. We understand that punishment was in place. But if we have proven that we have rehabilitated, if that's what the system is supposed to be about, then utilize us and let us, show you that it could be done another way. You don't want to have people home and every time they misstep, they have to worry about whether or not they're going to be sent back. So President Biden, all of you legislators, do something so that you can keep us all home. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Now I want to kick to my friend Udi with the ACLU and just thank you for all the ACLU has done to lift up this cause and make the public aware of it.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, FAMM, for being the leaders on this. Thank you to Dawn for birthing this movement, right? For being the spark that made it all happen, for, you inspire us with your courage. So you've heard a bit now about the crisis situation that we're in, and you're going to spend the next hour and a half hearing more about the thousands of lives being impacted. But I'm here to talk about solutions and to give you a preview of what the administration is already saying and what we as advocates are asking for. So as you know, the White House recently announced that it will begin considering clemency for people who are in home confinement and were convicted of 1, a nonviolent drug offense, and 2, have between 18 months and 4 years remaining on their sentence. Now, look, it's important to thank President Biden for beginning to recognize that clemency must be the solution to this crisis, that it is the permanent solution that will allow people to move on with their lives and no longer have the threat of prison hanging over their heads. So this is progress, and I want to emphasize that. But the current clemency standard being proposed by the White House is just simply inadequate. It's going to help some, but it's going to exclude many, many, many people. And it has little to any rational basis. Limiting clemency based on the number of years left on a sentence or based on the underlying offense does nothing to make people safer, but simply creates arbitrary standards that exclude potentially thousands of people from being helped. Clemency and specifically commutations, right, which is what we're talking about here, which reduces a person's sentence, it's a really powerful tool for justice. And presidents have almost unlimited authority to use the power of clemency. It's granted under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. And really for the first 2 centuries of our nation's history, presidents used their power of clemency broadly. And it really wasn't until the rise of the so-called tough on crime era, and really beginning with President Nixon, that presidents began to shy away from the broad use of commutations powers, with the sole exception being President Barack Obama. But today, unfortunately, we've seen that clemency has become extremely politicized, with clemency offered only to those with political connections and not being used to fix systemic injustices. So what we're asking President Biden to do is to use his full power of clemency, to do so in a categorical way that applies to everyone. We're asking that President Biden issue an order that creates a presumption that all people on home confinement under the CARES Act will have their sentence commuted, that there will be this presumption of clemency. If the government wants to make the case that they shouldn't be released, they can make that case, but the onus should not be on the person in home confinement to make the case of why they should be released. The presumption should be that everyone on home confinement under the CARES Act will be released. Doing it this way will not create these arbitrary standards that are fiction, right? That somehow a 4-year cap on the number of years remaining on your sentence is somehow the logical thing to do, or limiting it only to nonviolent drug offenses is somehow the logical thing to do. Creating these kind of, and I'm sorry, what feel like fake criteria does nothing other than exclude people needlessly. But taking this categorical approach that applies to everyone will ensure that everyone sees justice. Now, I'll end by saying, to some, this may sound radical, but when you look at the history of the United States, there is precedent literally beginning with the first president of the United States of using categorical clemency as a way to fix an injustice, right? President George Washington in 1794 issued broad clemency to people convicted under the Whiskey Rebellion. Both Presidents Lincoln and Johnson issued categorical clemency to ex-Confederates. In the 20th century, President Roosevelt provided clemency to people convicted under the Espionage Act. President Truman provided clemency to more than 1,500 people who were in prison for refusing to cooperate with the draft during World War II. And more recently, both President Ford, a Republican, and President Carter, a Democrat, issued clemency to thousands of people who deserted during the Vietnam War or evaded the draft. They both talked about it as this is a way to heal the nation. President Biden today has the opportunity to similarly heal the nation. The crisis of mass incarceration has devastated communities. Many of the policies that led to mass incarceration were supported by Senator Joe Biden. So we are now asking President Joe Biden to help heal the nation and provide clemency to all people on home confinement without creating arbitrary standards that will exclude potentially thousands of people.
Thanks, Udi. And we're going to keep this moving on. I just want to say that in addition to ACLU, we've had dozens of groups support this effort, and I won't be able to name them all. I just want to mention a few: Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Justice Action Network, Right on Crime, Move On, just to give you a sense of the diversity of the groups that are supporting this effort. And one of the groups that have been the most active is the Color of Change. And so at this point, I am happy to introduce Scott Roberts with Color of Change to commence our next panel. And we will look forward to talking to everybody later.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Dawn and Udi. Thanks to everyone who's come to join us today. As Kevin said, I'm Scott Roberts. I'm the Senior Director of Criminal Justice and Democracy Campaigns at Color of Change. For the next 15 minutes, we're going to have a very special panel where we're going to hear from people who have been directly impacted by home confinement, people who would obviously be positively impacted by a clemency order from President Biden. So we're going to create some space to hear the stories of Cheryl Johnson and Travis Rogers. Travis still on? There you are, Travis. Thanks. Hey. I'm going to try to take up as little space as possible and let you all tell your stories. I'm going to have some follow-up questions. But I just want to start by asking you both to just introduce yourselves, tell us, who you are, where you're coming from, what it's been like so far to be on home confinement. Cheryl, if you don't mind getting us started.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Cheryl Johnson. Sorry about that.
Okay, take it back.
I live in Houston, Texas. Had a 12-year sentence, did 7 years on a 12-year sentence. COVID hit, was able to come home. And it has been wonderful as far as being able to, most importantly, I'm a mom of 3 young men. When I left, my kids were babies, came home to grown men. And that was like I felt like I was in the twilight zone because I'm used to telling them what to do. Now I'm coming home and they don't have to listen to me because they're grown men with families and jobs and paying mortgages. And it was just like, oh, hey, I'm still trying to get acclimated with being home. So coming home, we have Sunday dinners. The kids come over. My baby boy is 19 years old. He still will come over once a week, spend a night with his mother. We have movie night. We had a conversation about me possibly have to be returned to prison. And they looked at me like, no, that's not gonna happen. And I'm like, yeah, the possibility is there that I may go back to prison. So you live every day with this cloud over your head of when their phone is gonna ring, when they're gonna come knock on their door of telling you you have to return to prison. While on home confinement, I had this invention in my head for like 6 years, but I was in prison and couldn't do nothing with it. Soon as I got released, you know, I came home, loved all my family, and I started making calls to try to get my invention I had in my head to come into fruition. And so I recently, probably about a month ago, received the very first prototype, and it's a hairbrush, it's a hot brush, straightening brush, you know, for the woman on the go. It's chargeable, USB port. So if you're in the back of an Uber and you don't have time to, you know, that type of stuff. So between now and Sunday, the engineer, which I found a guy in Indonesia, he'll be sending me my final prototype. So I'm super excited about that. But the issue is, what if I get something back to prison? So I done did all this hard work trying to get this brush out. My goal is to get this brush out, hopefully it'll be a huge success where I can employ people. I think I'm leaning more toward felons because it is so hard to get a job once you went through the system, especially a good paying job. So other than that, it's just like every day being at home and just, I have to, recently when I first got home, they gave me an ankle monitor. You have to put in passes for like hygiene passes. In the area that I'm in, they do not give you a pass to like go exercise or bowling or out to eat or shopping. They don't give you passes like that. So it's mostly to go to the grocery store and pick up your hygienes and your food, toilet tissue and stuff like that. So they give you a pass once a week to do that. Most recently, they gave me a cell phone. So now I have this cell phone as well as the ankle monitor. And what the cell phone does, it goes off at any given time. And once it goes off, I have to take a selfie. So if it goes off at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, I have to wake up, turn on the light, go in the bathroom, take a selfie. And sometimes it goes off 3 or 4 times during the night. But that's part of being at home.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay.
I just want to make a personal appeal. President Biden, we need this brush out here in the world. You know, give Cheryl clemency, you know? But let's try to move quickly to Travis. Same question, Travis, you know, tell us about yourself and, you know, what it's been like so far on confinement.
Hey, my name's Travis Rogers. I'm from Springfield, Missouri. I've been out for 15 months now. I got out on June 30th, and I've been at my job for 13 months. I got home. I lost my mom when I was in prison, so I got home to my dad. I'm staying at his place right now, and he's a 100% disabled veteran. He needs me there. He's 75. He's elderly. He's physically capable. Sometimes his mental capacity is slipping just a little bit. So I've been a big help to him. You know, I got to reconnect with my kid and trying to work things out with my family that I left behind. My job's been amazing. I mean, I've got here, I've had plenty of opportunity to move up. You know, there's not much of a workforce anymore. So we're always hurting for people, and there's plenty of room for advancement here, but I don't really want to do that to these people because I feel like if I tell them I'm going to move forward and then I go back, you know, I don't feel good about doing that to somebody. So my 1 year mark came the other day, August 24th. I'd missed 1 hour of scheduled leave of work. I feel like that's pretty good. I love my job. I love my family. It's been wonderful being out. As Cheryl said, on the same token, some of the stuff we go through is difficult. Like I definitely get better than Cheryl gets. I get a 6 hour a week pass to go out, but that includes hygiene, your food, and whatever you can squeeze in there. You got to put where you're going, the address, the phone number, all that goes with it. And it's hard because I live so far out in the country, the drive time don't count. So by the time I get to town, get everything done, it's back to being home, which I'm thankful and I'm grateful. I don't want to sound like I'm not, but it's hard to get anything done with your family, or, you know, it's hard. It's tough. I've had 8 ankle monitors so far because they've all been so faulty. So that's been a chore, going to the halfway house and taking care of that. But other than that, it would be bad for my dad and my child, and you know, to have to go back. I haven't even really wanted to tell anybody because I don't know how they're going to react. You know, for me, it's one thing, but for them, you know I can do it, but I don't know if they got it in them again, you know, and that's concerning.
That's right.
It's concerning.
Yeah, I think that's, this is one of the things that we really want people to understand and take away from this conversation, right? Is that the impact is actually not just on folks who would be returned to prison, right? This is about how it's impacted families, communities, employers, as you said, Travis, people who need Cheryl's intervention. I say that jokingly, but also seriously, like that's a real contribution
That's great
to our society. So one thing I did hear from you, Cheryl. Oh, there it is. We see the prototype. Hold it up one more
Good
time.
job, Cheryl.
That's the first one.
Nice.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to see that. Cheryl, I wanted to follow up with you because you said you served 7 years on a 12-year sentence. Not my strong point, but that sounds like around 5 years left. And you're someone who is just kind of out of reach of this kind, as Udi said, arbitrary move that the White House has made so far to say that people with 4 years or less are eligible for expedited clemency, right? So just wondering how that feels to you to hear that limit and know that, you're just beyond it.
Well, when I heard about President Biden's decision about releasing non-violent drug offenders, that really took me off because I'm a white collar. My offense was tax fraud. Mm-hmm. And I'm like not knocking no one because I would like to see everyone at home, but it was like, really? Like, so you're gonna exclude a whole group of people just because we didn't sell drugs? And that was so unfair to me. Not 5 years left. When you do federal time, you do 85% of your time. So on 12, you'll do 10. So I have 3 years left, which if he stick with the 4 years, I would qualify. Mm-hmm. However, it's just so unfair. It's so unfair to say, okay, I'm gonna look at these group of people and exclude these group of people. The differential is just like, especially when the whole time, let me tell you something about Cheryl. When I got indicted, that was, if I would have never went to prison, I would have never broke another law in my life anyway, because that was like, I'm sorry, So to go through this whole time, never been in trouble, never anything, and you still overlook me because I didn't sell drugs, it's like, and I'm at home, I'm doing all the right things. Like my family is my everything. Before our webinar, my son called, hey mom, you at home? Yes, I'm about to start, my webinar with FAMM. And he was like, okay, I'm coming over there. Good luck. I love you. I'm coming to give you a kiss. It's just simple stuff. And it's like, prison, you can't get that. Prison is 10-minute phone calls in between checking emails. Parent can't parent for prison like that. And although my children are 26, 22, and 19, they need their mom. So when I first came home, all three of my boys, my oldest boy live in Miami. So of course he flew in or whatever, he rode my brother to come pick me up. That first night, me and my three boys laid in bed, just boo-hooed and cried.
Take your time.
So to even think about leaving them again. Yeah, it's disturbing. And everyone I talk to in the community that even knows that this is going on, it's like, you're not going back to prison. They wouldn't dare do that. Society can't wrap their head around. They let you out and saying, now you have to go back. So, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I mean, I know this is for everyone impacted by this, including families, communities. This is an incredibly difficult.
Absolutely, because this doesn't just affect me and Travis. Like this affects people, my neighbor. I sit on my porch because I can't go to his, he'll sit on his porch and we'll have our coffee and we talk back and forth. Hey, did you see such and such on news? I did, so it's just like, I don't know.
we want you all to be able to stay in the people in your lives, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's really important. You got me a little
Absolutely.
emotional as well. But I just want to end us with one question. I'm hoping we can maybe end on a hopeful, aspirational note. I just want to ask you all, we only have a couple minutes left, so, we'll have to be short, but what would it mean to you? How do you think it would feel to hear that President Biden has given the order to grant you all clemency? Travis, do you want to get us started?
Oh, it would take the roadblock out of my whole life right now, because I've got everything. I'm just living day by day right now, and I can't move forward. And I don't want to sound ungrateful, because I feel like I do every time I say this, but I'm not. I'm so thankful to be home. But I can't get a loan. I can't get you just can't move forward. And I don't want to make plans with my daughter to do stuff, or my dad, or you're kind of at a standstill. And it would just mean, I've proven myself, and Cheryl's proven herself. We don't deserve that. We wasn't told we were going to go back. We was told we were out. When we walked out that door, we were free. And I got home, and that's what I told these people. And I'm only as good as my word. And so I tell them I'm free, and now I'm a liar. And I don't know that, honestly, my dad's going to think, well, he's done got back on. He may not even, why are you going back? I'm worried about what he's going to say. Like, he might think I got back on drugs, and they're sending me back because I got back. I didn't get back on drugs. I've been clean 11 years. Very proud of that. And it's bad to feel like he might feel that way. I know my daughter isn't going to believe that, because she's with me all the time. But my dad's old, and he's like, well, they wouldn't just send him back. But because nobody believes it. Like Cheryl said, they're like, oh, you ain't going back here. Yeah, we are going to go back if they don't do something, So it would mean everything to me. It would.
Thanks, Travis. Cheryl, do you want to give us a closing thought?
Yeah, I agree with Travis. First and foremost, I am so grateful to be at home. Like, regardless of what goes on, let me state that. But going back to prison, let me tell you this. I've never in my life been a dog person, ever in my life. Came home, April, my son, who lived in Miami, he got a little schnauzer. He brought this dog to me for me to dog sit, because he had to go out the country. I done fell in love with the dog now. So this is my grand dog. So it's like, when I tell you I love this dog, this is, I ain't gonna mess with you. This is my baby. This is my best friend. And he, even with me coming home, and I get some type of anxiety sometimes, because things kind of get overwhelming when you've been gone so long. Even going to Walmart. The first day I went to Walmart, I had 12 different Dove soaps to choose from, where I'm used to just picking one or the other. And I just stood there, and I read there, smelled every one of them. My brother was so patient. He just looked at me and smiled. And I said, I know, I'm sorry, I need to hurry up. He said, I've been waiting on you so many years to get home. You think an hour in this so ain't gonna worry me? And I was just like, okay. So I'm smelling each one. We get on the brush aisle, I'm doing my brush. So I'm looking at each package, trying to figure out how it works. Clemency will mean everything to not just me. Because I am doing some stuff that's going to I'm trying to affect the world in a good way. I'm trying to give jobs. You want to make America great again? I'm with it. I'm trying to open up a factory or hire some people and do some things. Can't do that if I go back to prison.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I know this panel has left me with more resolve than ever to make sure that folks like you all can stay home. I see people in the chat sharing their stories as well. So y'all are real inspiration. Thank you for your courage to continue fighting for everyone to get to be affected by this clemency order. So with that, we are going to turn it over to the next panel, where we're going to talk about the problem with home confinement. And I want to turn it over to Amanda Hall with Dream Court Justice.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, FAMM, all the groups participating today, all the other organizations that have been working tirelessly on this issue, and most importantly, the folks that are directly impacted by Keep Them Home. So today I'm here to talk to two amazing women whose stories are so vital and powerful when we talk about individuals out on the CARES Act, home confinement, and some barriers and what those look like. So I want to go ahead and not waste any more time and hear from these amazing women. So I'm going to start with Gwen, and next up we will have Lynn. But Gwen, if you would just tell us all a little bit more about yourself, a little about your story, where you're from, that would be great.
Hi, everybody. Telling this story. I'm a 76-year-old grandmother, 4 sons, family, 94-year-old mother who's as healthy as any of us, who's moving, who's doing things. I came home after a 16 years of a 34-year sentence. I came home on home confinement, ankle monitor, to a halfway house, and proceeded to try to just get my life back together, reunited with my mom, reunited with my family, my grandkids, started connecting with some organizations that had supported me. FAMM, other organizations had supported me while I was inside. So I reconnected to those organizations. The facility that I was in didn't give me a lot of support. I think maybe it might've been because of the pandemic, they were limited. But anyway, I needed some computer skills. I had gotten a job which required computer skills. I had to leave the job because I couldn't do the work. So I sought a class. Couldn't get it from my halfway house. So an organization that I volunteered with, they began a class. I submitted all the paperwork, like they said. I submitted all the paperwork, thought it was approved. Second class, they said they had been trying to call me. I needed this computer class. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the skills even for this constant telephone calls that I was getting on the home because of the home monitor. So I found a class, a free class, teaching me how to use computers, taking the class. First week I got there, second week, third week. They tried to call me and couldn't reach me because I had the phone turned off because I was in class. I was remanded to my home, really home confinement, whereas before, like everyone said, we could come out and go to places that we were scheduled to go to. We could get approved to go to certain places. So that was a great thing, that I was getting approval to go places. But because of this class, I couldn't have the phone on. To cut things short, because they couldn't reach me for 4 hours, I was charged with escape. 4 hours is the maximum amount of time on home confinement that you cannot be reached. You must have a legitimate reason. Escape is the worst charge that you could get. I could have gotten reprimanded. I could have gotten sanctioned. There are a lot of lesser things that could have happened to me, but it didn't. I got charged with escape. I got remanded back to prison, back to jail, and stayed there for 21 days. My family, my friends, my community, I would still be there, I believe, if it hadn't been for you all, if it hadn't been for the advocacy of FAMM, of organizations. I can't tell you how devastating it was for my mom. She lost a lot of weight during those 21 days. My kids, I have 4 sons who I'm so proud of because they were instrumental in helping me to come back home by contacting people, by organizations like the Color Change, FAMM, other organizations. So they lobbied for me and I was blessed. I didn't get clemency. I got compassionate release by my judge. But mind you, my paperwork had been on my judge's desk for over a year. I had been seeking compassionate release, and it wasn't until this terrible incident happened that enough attention was drawn to open up the door for me to be released on compassionate release. So after 21 days, I was released on compassionate release, and I set my mind that I wouldn't be the only one who would receive this, that there were so many others who were being sent back on technicalities. I know of a person who got sent back because he had too many asthma attacks. You know, that we must look at this as a bigger picture, not as one individual, me, who caught God's favor, because that's what it was, but look at the thousands who are out there. Look at all my friends, Lynn and everybody else who's out there, who are doing the right things, who are reunited with their family, who got in custody of the kids. What are you going to do? Send those people back? Our prison system is supposed to be about rehabilitation. We have been deemed to be the rehabilitated. We have been deemed to be the people who got vetted, who said that through their own process, we were eligible. We were not a threat to our communities. We could come home. So now, because of nothing, because of minor infractions, you're sending us back? Please, I'm begging President Biden. He doesn't want to be the president that really does mass incarceration. He's the president who said, well, I'm going to create alternatives. I'm going to end mass incarceration. Then do it. He can do it. And that's what we're asking, do it. As they said, this could be the pilot program of all pilot programs. This could be the program that shows you that prison works, that we are being rehabilitated through the justice system. The devastation that it puts on families, I've seen personally. I've seen what it done to my mother. I've seen what it done to me. I know that there's a better way. I'm grateful. Yes, I am. I'm grateful that I was on home confinement to get back to my family. I'm grateful for all that. But please, it's a burden to be, not to be able to come home from a meeting and not be able to stop at the store. If your son calls you and says that he's sick, you can't go over to his house and give him a hug. Those little things, that restriction, all I can say is that I'm grateful, but in my gratefulness, it has made me determined to see this same pathway forward for others, to see the same pathway of clemency, so that they can do, I'm free now. I can stop at the store. I can go to 7-Eleven when I want to. I can get a Big Mac. I can do those things. And it's a wonderful feeling, but I also know that I'm still not free. I have a parole. I still have 5 years to look at to make sure that I'm doing the right things. There are limitations that can still be put on us even though we're home, even though we have clemency. There's still things that we might have to abide by. I'm not saying let people go who mess up. No, not people who mess up, because this is an opportunity and we should take clear advantage of it. And most of us are. As Kevin said, the numbers are so great of the positive. Please, President Biden, look at these people, look at us and see that we can become active members in our community. I volunteer in a couple organizations. I'm doing things with my family, but my volunteerism is helping young people. We have a lot to offer. We have a lot of assets. Let us stay home and show you that what we learned, our lesson, and that we can do and we can help better our communities. We're needed out here. We're really needed. Let us stay out here and do the work that we know we can do. That's it.
Thank you so much, Miss Gwen. I'm so glad you were home. You should have never been sent back in the first place. And I hope you eat all the Big Macs that you want every day that you want. Next, it's been such a pleasure to get to know our next panelist in my position at Dream for Justice as the campaign director. I'm going to kick it over to Lynn. And Lynn, if you would also just tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with home confinement.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, FAMM, for having me on today. I'm Lynn Espejo. I'm from Arkansas. I've been married for almost 20 years to my husband, Poncho, and we have together, between us, 3 grown sons. In February of 2018, I self-surrendered to federal prison to serve a 45-month sentence. In May of 2020, I was fortunate enough to be granted CARES Act relief, and I returned home to my family. And at that time, I was on home confinement. I was not allowed to leave my home. At first, I could not have a job. I could not leave at all. I was not allowed to go and buy groceries. I had no hygiene pass because I was married. I was told that my husband could pick up all those items for me. I was constantly monitored. I had to check in between 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning and 8 to 9 o'clock at night, and my phone rang all day for just random checks, including 2 to 3 o'clock every morning, which, by the way, wakes up your entire family. And so, you know, you're on constant supervision. A few months into my home confinement, I was given, I was told I had like 9 days to get a job, because all of a sudden that we needed a job. And I was fortunate enough to have an attorney friend and my church to hire me. During the time that I was on home confinement, it was high anxiety, because if you miss a call, or for instance, when I would go to work sometimes, you have to call when you leave your home, you have to call when you get to wherever you're going, and then you have to call when you leave there and call when you get back home. There were times when, unfortunately, things would get confused and it wouldn't get logged in by accident, and I would get a call and ask where I was at. And of course, those kinds of things are constantly, you know, stressing you out. And I've talked to many others on home confinement that have similar situations where, you know, accidentally something doesn't get logged, and that could get them violated. Unfortunately, 8 months into my home confinement, I was violated, much like Miss Gwen was from the CARES Act. I was violated due to the fact that I was unaware that I was not allowed to continue to keep communication through the BOP's monitored core links email system with women that I had left behind, that I had become close to, and that I was encouraging, you know, to keep their head up. I was returned to the county jail where I waited, returned to prison. Fortunately, like Miss Gwen, I had a compassionate release motion pending before the court. I had asked to get off of home confinement onto compassionate release due to the fact that I have high anxiety, and I was wanting to get counseling that was not being offered to me at the time. And also because when I had to self-surrender to prison, I needed one internship and one class to finish my master's in clinical and mental health counseling. That semester, I was readmitted to school and I was to start class. Unfortunately, when I was violated, I had to miss 2 weeks of class. 2 weeks, 15 days. On the 15th day of my return to the county jail, I was fortunate enough to receive home compassionate release. And so then I was able to graduate in April with my master's in mental health counseling. And so as a mental health professional, I would like to say, I beg you, President Biden, to grant clemency to everyone on home confinement. The amount of stress and anxiety that I felt under home confinement, that all the ladies and men that I talk to that are on the CARES Act still feel, they should not have to feel that daily. I believe to return these people, these individuals back to prison would not only create a mental health crisis for the individuals being returned to prison, but I do believe families would suffer greatly. We're talking about individuals that, as others have said on this panel, are just doing everything they're supposed to be. They're the example of what should happen, why we over incarcerate and need to start looking at, does everyone that commits a crime need to be in prison to be rehabilitated? This group of individuals has proven that we can look at alternatives to incarceration, and that we should. And so I beg the president to please grant clemency, not only to the people that you have put on your expedited list, but to anyone else that is still under the CARES Act. They have reunited with their families. They are working. They are doing everything they are supposed to do. They are the perfect example of a success story. So I ask that you consider everyone to be on the list. And again, I believe it will be a mental health crisis for both the individual and the families if they are returned to prison. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn and Gwen, for sharing your stories. We echo also President Biden. Indefinite home confinement is such a stress on so many people. Lynn and Gwen show examples of how easy it is to be violated. It was life-saving during the pandemic. These individuals have proven beyond doubt that they deserve to be home. So grant them all clemency. Now let's switch gears, and I'm going to throw it over to James Williams from Arnold Ventures to talk about the business and law enforcement perspective.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to all the panelists, and a special thank you to FAMM for organizing this, but also just for your steadfast and unrelenting advocacy on this just horrific situation. Before I turn over to the panelists, I felt one really strong emotion listening to this today, and I just had to get it off my chest. It's just felt shame. Shame on us, and that this is something that's within our power to control. The administration ran on this during the campaign. It's in the president's ability to do this right now. And, that there are folks within the administration who are considering what to do and made some of these arbitrary choices that leave so many behind. This is not some, miracle that needs to happen. This is within our control. And that's why we had elections. These were things that were made commitments to. And so, shame on us and shame on them. And I'm just, very touched and moved by the stories we've heard today. And I'm very excited for our next two panelists, because they're going to come in with, I think, some really, really important stories around the perspective of why this is important from the voice of law enforcement and public safety, because this is often one of the issues that's raised as to why these types of clemencies and commutations can't happen, as well as what it means for our economy. What does it mean to be a small business owner? What does it mean to try and hire workers? So we're pleased to have Mark Osler and Lorenzo with us here. I'm going to start with Mark, who is a longtime expert on criminal justice reform. But Mark, I want you to put on your former federal prosecutor hat here for a minute and talk to us about public safety. Why, in your eyes, is this an important issue for public safety? And how did you think about this issue from the perspective of being a former law enforcement official, of why this is so important?
Yes, and thank you for the chance to do so. This has been a remarkable gathering. I'm speaking today on behalf of the law enforcement leaders to reduce crime and incarceration. We've been working on this issue with the Law Enforcement Action Partnership and Fair and Just Prosecution. I am a former federal prosecutor from Detroit, and our group is composed of people, some in corrections, some people who are police chiefs or former police chiefs, people who are county attorneys all across the country, and certainly bipartisan across the political spectrum. The one thing that we have in common is that our careers at some point have forced us to be accountable for public safety, that we've had to answer for public safety. And if you've done that work, that becomes a razor for decision, and you become good at analyzing risk because your job depends on it. People's lives depend on it. And it's from that perspective that our group is urging clemency for all the people who are out on home confinement. This is a group that has been vetted in ways that people in law enforcement understand, that the administration is saying, well, we're looking for nonviolent people, as if that's a vetting that they're doing. Well, none of the people who got home confinement in the first place were there for violent crimes. So that's not even an issue. That's not even something they have to sort out. But this is a group that's really unique historically. And I say this as somebody who studies this in terms of being a safe risk for clemency, because of the vetting, first of all, that was done before they were allowed home confinement, but also really importantly, that what we've seen since they've been on home confinement, that we have such a low level of recidivism. And just to set the baseline on this, Sentencing Commission, U.S. Sentencing Commission came out with a study yesterday of people released from prison in 2010 and looking at recidivism in the 8 years after that. It was about bit under 50%. And compared to that, out of the 4,000 or some that have been on home confinement, we've seen what I've seen is 3 people. So it's a tiny fraction. It's a remarkable success in terms of avoiding recidivism. We want to keep in mind that if we send this group of people back to prison, we are going to be overburdening a system that's already incredibly overburdened, understaffed, and across the country, incredible staffing problems with the Bureau of Prisons and management issues where they're overwhelmed with what they already have to deal with. And so to have a mass influx would be a disaster in that way too. We also need to keep in mind that the process of clemency can be expedited in a way that the administration isn't considering, that they need to do it in a clean and whole way to really have integrity. And that's something that people in law enforcement look for is where are the lines? And here the line is very clear that in protecting public safety, we can draw that line around this entire group. The people that I work with in this group, they know the tragedies that crime can create, but we're also cognizant of the tragedies that we can create by incarcerating people too long or having restrictions that don't match the risk that people pose. And because we can compound the tragedies that already exist. And that's what we risk doing here. And finally, I'm a scholar of clemency. This is something I write about. It's something I've studied about. I speak about it frequently. And the justice and mercy that's embodied in clemency, that's a constant through most of American history, going all the way back to George Washington. And what would be an aberration from that history would be not granting clemency to these people that are out on home confinement. To view that granting them would be some kind of aberration is just wrong. That what we've seen over and over again from presidents of both parties, liberal, conservative, is that when it's called for, when the risk is evaluated properly, clemency has been used. This is one of those times.
Thank you so much, Mark, and just for your lifelong dedication to this. And I guess that makes me ask Lorenzo, you're a successful small business owner in Odessa, Texas. You got Adequate AC and Heating LLC. We've heard all these stories today about these people that have been personally affected, people who work on criminal justice reform, who work in law enforcement. But what are you doing here? Why is this important to you and that you're taking time out of your day to speak to us about this issue?
Yes, my name is Lorenzo Bersoza. I'm the owner of Adequate Air Conditioning and Heating LLC. We also own Adequate Renewable Resources that we just started dabbling in. And we employed Jesse Rodriguez. He got out on the CARES Act. I think he might have had like 5 years left on his sentence. And so he's here working with us. Jesse, the way I see him, man, he's a very hard worker. He shows up to work. He's the first one here, last one out. He's following all the guidelines that through the halfway house and that are asked of him. And I see the burden on him whenever he heard that he may be going back in. He's purchased a vehicle. There's payments that need to be made. And if he goes back in, so what's going to happen to those purchases that he's made? He's planning, he's a entrepreneur, so he's already looking into opening up little businesses and whatnot, but his hands are tied. And first and foremost is his boys and his daughter. He's obviously rekindling that relationship with them. He was so involved with them before he went into prison, and he's now, when it's available to him, he'll go watch their little football games and whatnot. But it's always in the back of his head now that, from what the rumors are, that it'll be this new year when they may get recalled. So, as far as his situation, we have another employee here that he's not out of the he's not released from the CARES Act, but he's on probation from the federal system as well. And we help these guys out. They're good people, hard workers. They have a lot to prove to themselves and their families and to the community that they're done with their past. So my experience with them is I think they deserve that chance. I mean, I just see the burden that he carries every day. You know, you just see it and they just kind of shrug their shoulders, and it's just rough on them. And it's hard for them to get a clear path on what their future holds for them, because they don't know if they get recalled from one day to the next. And like I mentioned before, man, first one here, last one out, always willing to work. It's just it's a good situation, because he could be getting paid $5 a month in prison, but you know, he's obviously out here and paying taxes and contributing to the community, and he's getting a chance to spend more time with his family now. I don't know what else to say.
No, Lorenzo, thank you so much. I just have a follow-up question for you on more generally. It's, been a pretty, reading the newspaper, you hear every day about how hard it is for businesses to find workers, particularly really productive, reliable workers. What would you say about, the opportunity for businesses like yourself to hire folks who had served in prison, who may be on probation? What's your message to them? And then, how has this been important to your business, particularly during, a pretty difficult and unique economic time?
So obviously there's workers out there right now that don't want to work because they're sitting at home just drawing a check and not working. So it's hard for us to find employees. And these guys come out hungry. I mean, they're backed up on bills, child support and whatnot through the time that they've been serving. So they're eager, they're ready to work and get start contributing to the community and being successful for themselves. So it's very important for me I have more success with the guy that's released as far as being a good employee, because the guys out here, they'll get a check or two and then they'll go draw unemployment. So these guys are willing to work and contribute to our business.
Thank you. Yeah, it's incredible to make, for your commitment to this, but also, it's the right moral thing to do. It's the right thing for your community, but it's also the right thing for your business, and to be able to have workers who are so just incredibly committed, dedicated. We thank you. And Mark, I'm not sure if I can get you back on screen for 1 second. I want to give you a chance to have some final thoughts on, you've been working as a prosecutor, and working on clemency for so much of your career. What do you think the holdups are? Like, put yourself in the perspective of some of the officials at the DOJ or in the White House counsel's office or in the Biden administration. What would you say to them, and understanding their perspective on this and maybe why they haven't moved as fast as they're doing? Put us at a little bit in their perspective, and then, what the arguments you would make to them on why they should move on this now.
Yeah, and the most important thing they need to hear is the stories that people have told today. That again, the people that I've worked with in this group that come from law enforcement, my own experience there is that it's all about the stories. It's all about the narratives. And often it's about the loss that occurs because of crime. But we also, and what we ignore too often, is the danger of continuing damage by the punishments that we mete out. Right now, the clemency process, including what the administration has announced for this, it has 7 layers. It includes the Deputy Attorney General and the White House counsel. The Deputy Attorney General has a huge amount of stuff to do. The White House counsel, isn't a criminal lawyer and has a lot on her plate as well. And so there needs to be a clean, simple answer. And we have been urging them to do that. I think that the problem is that too often people in power don't hear the voices of people who are impacted, that they are kept, in a bubble apart from that. And policy too often ignores what we've heard today. that the loss to families, the loss to employers, the loss to society of a whole, when we don't take seriously the imperative of freedom, is something that best comes through in a story that I can't tell, but others have told here today.
Thank you very much, and appreciate those comments. And I hope the administration is listening. Now, and to everyone who may be driving by or lives in the Odessa area, I hope you'll, look up Lorenzo for all your AC and heating needs. He clearly is doing the right thing for himself, his community, and this country. And we hope the Biden administration will do the same. So now, for all the press on the call, we thank you so much for being here. We're going to transition now to Q&A with all the panelists. So I will toss it over to Kevin and Rabiah from FAMM. And just again, a special thank you to them for all you're doing and for everyone who joined today.
Thank you so much. Can everybody pop on if you're here? We've been monitoring the chat. There are not a whole lot of questions in the chat. I'm assuming that the panel has just been that thorough. But I will say, just to address some of the questions in the chat, this briefing will be available on all of FAMM's platforms and maybe a few others. So that will happen. We will be sending this briefing also an email to all press who are not able to attend today, and anyone else who has registered, so that it's all on record. People will have seen this as well as watched it online. So I wanted to kick it to see if anybody had any last remarks that they wanted to say, or anything that they feel like was not addressed in the panels that they want to make sure that they impart. Go ahead, Udi.
Yeah, the one thing that I forgot to mention, but other people, referenced it, was the bigger picture. We have this video of President Biden speaking specifically to one of our volunteers during the 2020 campaign, where he committed to cutting incarceration by 50% if he were elected president in the United States. It's a video that I'm happy to share. I think many people have seen. And then listening to all the stories today and all of the advocates, the people on home confinement, if he can't, use the power of clemency for this population, it just calls into question his entire commitment to criminal justice reform and to reducing the federal prison population. And last I checked, which was about a week ago, the federal prison population today is actually higher than it was about a year ago. So not only is President Biden hasn't committed yet to his 50% incarceration goal, which he said on video, during the campaign trail, the federal population has actually gone up so far under his leadership. So this is it. Kevin says this a lot. Others have said this. This is a bellwether issue. If he can't, use broad clemency here, then it calls into question his entire commitment to criminal justice reform and to ending mass incarceration. And this is particularly troublesome since, again, it is Senator Joe Biden that pushed so many of the policies that now we're asking President Joe Biden to undo.
Mark?
Yeah, just, I'm sitting here in Minneapolis and I look out my window. I'm not that far from George Floyd Square. We had a national movement where people were in the streets, and it wasn't about Afghanistan. It wasn't about the pandemic. It wasn't about the budget. It was about criminal justice. That's why people were in the streets. That's why millions of people took action. And that's while Joe Biden was running for president. This is an easy lift. This is something that if he wants to do something about criminal justice and push back against the retributive instincts that got us a police officer kneeling on the neck of a Black man, this is an easy one and he needs to do it.
So there is a question in the chat that I do want anybody to answer. I know there's been this ongoing issue of urgency, right? Like, how urgent is this? Will people go back January? Will they be sending people back en masse in January as soon as the pandemic ends? What are some of you guys' sense on timing of this? Why is it urgent, and why should people do something now?
Well, let me just say this, that to that question, the emergency declaration gets extended 3 months at a time. And the latest thinking is that it will be extended through the end of January. And I must say, one frustrating thing in advocating on this issue has been the response from the Bureau of Prisons and the Justice Department that this isn't imminent. This isn't a problem they have to deal with right away because the emergency is not going to end until January. And I try to communicate to them that for those in this situation, the uncertainty is just awful. And Cheryl and Travis, you both mentioned this. So Travis, I'd like to go back to you and just ask about why is it so important to get the answer, not only right, but to get it right now?
Well, I mean, we have loose ends out here we need to tie up. And I mean, I honestly, if I'm going to go back, I'd like to probably cut down to part-time on my job and spend the time with my family and let them know what's going on and just spend as much, because I've got a 21-year sentence and I've done 10 years on it. So I've got a considerable amount of time to do. I've saved up plenty of money to where I could do that just in case this happens, but I would like to know, because 3 months, that's not much time when you can only leave for 6 hours to get loose ends tied up. And definitely want the time with my family.
And Cheryl, just because I do hear this a lot, like we don't need to decide this right now because it's not going to happen tomorrow. Even the news media, part of the reason we're doing this briefing and bringing your voices is because the press says this isn't imminent. They want to cover daily stories. So can you talk about how important it is to get this decision, these assurances right now?
Well, for me personally, I can't even move forward into a relationship because I don't know how this is going to affect me. I've seen so many people in prison, women that were married, boyfriends, and they were stressed the heck out because that's a barrier between you and your loved one. And so there's a man, but I won't even give him the time of day because it's like, I don't want to start this and then bam, I go to prison. Yeah, you can tell me you're going to be there for me, I don't want to do that. So, and not only that, I agree with Travis, my family. If I know when I'm going back between now, if January is the date, so-called date, I'll know between now and January, I got to try to smush every second a minute into my family, try to find somebody to take over this brush. I don't know if that's going to be, I don't know if this brush is going to fail because I won't have the people in place to see my dream come true. So it's like, it is a dark cloud hanging over our head. So we need to know, are we going back to prison or not? And even mentally, so we can get mentally prepared to go back into prison.
I appreciate that. Thank you. If we don't have any questions from the press, we could wrap this up. I do want to say there were a lot of questions about this. I've been working on this for about 7 months now. This was the best presentation I have seen of the problem. Thank you all for sharing your perspective. It was incredibly moving. And I think we touched sort of every piece of this problem in a really compelling way. So we will be getting this out. This will be on platforms where you can share it. Yes, we will be sending it to people in the administration in addition to our conversations. So I know there were other things going on for the Justice Department press, but trust me, as Rabiah said, we will make sure everybody gets a copy of this, and we ask that you share it as well. So with that, why don't we wind up and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, FAMM.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on.